Hi, everyone. Okay, so I'm so excited for this message today. We're going to be talking about the Lost City of Polaris. And today's going to be a little bit different because normally I just channel the messages live, but I've actually already channeled this one and I channeled it quite a while ago. So right now it's currently June, the last day of June in the year 2025. I actually channeled this message in I think it was like November-ish time frame of 2024, maybe December, but late fall of December 2024. And at that time I channeled and I like typed it up on my computer on my laptop. And so I've been sitting on it for a while. And I've actually gone back to Polaris since then, and I've worked with one of my clients there. And so we'll get into that a little bit, but today's going to look a little bit different than a normal video. But first, I want to talk briefly about who I am and what I do. So I'm Judith Hope. I'm an Akashic channel. So I work primarily with the Akashic records, and specifically the Galactic portal chamber within the Akashic records to channel different information about different galactic ETs, different galactic civilizations, which is what I am doing today. I'm also a galactic energy worker. So that's another thing I do in the galactic portal chamber is I actually do light language, sound frequency work. And the galactic portal chamber was a building that once existed in the Lyran star system prior to it being destroyed during the Lyran Wars. So it exists now, like in higher frequencies, higher dimensions, but it doesn't exist physically anymore. But I access it through the Akashic records using my third eye. So that's a little bit about what I do. So I just want to give that brief description and then let's get into it. So, like I mentioned, today we're going to be talking about the Lost City of Polaris. And I want to talk a little bit about how I even discovered this city. And so it's interesting because I kept going to this city in my dreams, right? And so I kept going there and having dreams where I was in the city, and the city really looked like Chicago. So for part of my life, I lived in Chicago, and it was so similar to it. So like for example, there's like a body of water on, I think it's the west. I'm pretty sure it's the west side of the city in Chicago, and this city, Polaris, was built exactly the same. So the city in my dreams, I didn't know it was called Polaris yet, but it has like this body of water, and then it has this like grassy patch, like grassy like bit of land beside the water, where I actually had a past life where I like lived in this like hobbit hole, like looking structure in there. And then it's just like there's other parts of the city that look similar. Like there's like medical appointments and things in that area where like the corn cob buildings are in Chicago on the Magnificent Mile by Michigan Avenue. Those buildings are apartments here on Earth, but in the city that looks just like Chicago, that's actually like a medical district, and I would go to like doctor's appointments there. And then the north part of the city was like not as nice, not as fancy. And I lived there. And it's interesting because like that's more residential in the north part of the city of Chicago too. Certain neighborhoods are nicer than others. But it always felt like I was in like kind of like the west northern part of the city in these dreams. And it just wasn't as nice as like being downtown. I just remember they were these like crazy like fancy clubs in the city in my dreams. I would go to these fancy clubs and restaurants, and that's where like I would work and do all, very similar to how it really is in Chicago, right? And so I kept going to the city over and over again. I mean, probably over the course of like probably like a year, I would go there in my dreams, and I'd wake up and I just feel like it was reminiscent of like my time in Chicago. And so there was one night though where I had this like really intense dream, and I figured out the next morning because I was actually like truly astral traveling there. Like part of my soul was like there that night. And we were first like in this like cantina or like bar where they were like it was familiar, and I was hanging out there and we were kind of like undercover, and then we were like walking around. It was snowy, I remember that. And then we were like in some parking lot doing something or other, and this like I guess a police force or like the people kind of like guarding patrolling the city, they found us, they saw us with like flashlights and stuff, and I just remember kind of like leaving my body, which I don't know that it was like, your soul's going to leave your body's going to, similar to passing away, like nothing to that level, but it felt more so like maybe I wasn't fully in a physical body, more like in a light body or something like that. And I just kind of like left. And it's weird because this dream was like so vivid and so real. And so I was like, what is going on? Like, why do I keep going to the city? It looks just like Chicago. It's so similar. And I just keep going there like over and over again. And so I ended up like channeling some information going into the Akashic records. And if you guys don't know what the Akashic records are, is it's basically this giant database of like everything that has ever happened in this galaxy, in this universe, and every galaxy. It's this giant like force field that you can access using your third eye. And it's typically kept in the fifth dimension and above. So we can access it in the fifth dimension in our third dimensional bodies. So I was like, let me go ask the Akashic records and just see like what is this city like? Why do I keep going to this city that's like Chicago? And it's weird because that night, that big dream that I had, kind of the last one, and I had more later, but the last one before I channeled this, or no, I had one more before I channeled this. But it was weird because I went there with someone that I knew in college, and this person was like a coworker. We weren't great friends, but we were kind of like friendly at work. And then I kind of kept up with him on like social media for a while, but we never really like, and I mean kept up with him. I mean like I would see his posts and maybe like them. We didn't really like message and stuff. So it was like someone like a kind of, coworker, like you're friendly with, you chat, like you like them, but you're not really like friends. But it's interesting because he was there that night, and by him, I mean, like, his soul was there with me, and we were doing, like, the scouting that night in the city, and that's another word that came through when I kinda went and channeled is, like, so I was like, I asked, like, "What are we why do I keep going to say, 'What is the city? Why are we doing?'" It basically came through like, "This is on Orion." Like, that's why you're there, like, "This is happening on Orion, and you were there scouting last night with, like, other people, from your star family, from the groups that you work with, like, in the astral plane, in the galaxy. You were there scouting." And so it's like, "Okay." And so I remember I was like, why do I keep going back to this city?" So I was there scouting that night. Why do I keep going back? And I remembered I channeled from the Akashic records that it's like I was under soul amnesia in that city for so many lifetimes. And I just loved it. And it was amazing. And I remember just being like, oh my gosh, because it's like I just went there so many times. And there was always this element of like trying to remember being familiar too every time I would go there. And so it's like I had soul amnesia and I was there, right? Which we have soul amnesia on earth, right? We don't remember anything prior to being born. By the time we're like 5 years old, we've forgotten, right? And so we don't know the name of our soul. We don't know what our soul's done, what our soul's been doing before this. That's why we have so many different religions with so many different like thoughts and belief systems, right? Is because we don't know that we don't know. We don't have, in a lot of cases like tangible proof. Now, I would argue that's changing in recent years, but for most of known civilization, right, we didn't, have that. And so I wanted to know more about the city that I was living in soul amnesia for. And it's interesting because I really liked living in Chicago. Like, that was my city. I love that city. I did not want to leave. I felt basically like, and this was before I was spiritually awakened, before I was like into anything that would be considered like spiritual or woo woo. I mean, I think maybe I was still going to church. I don't remember exactly when I stopped going to church, but I just remember this overwhelming knowing that I had to leave the city and I didn't want to. And I remember I was driving to the airport after the movers had come. They had packed up all my stuff. It was I was moving to another state. It was out, going to the warehouse where it'd be kept, and then it's going to go on a truck to another state. And I just remember being so sad. Like, I don't want to leave this city. And I just love that city so much, even though, I felt my inner knowing like my time there, had expired. And I think that that was kind of explained, and it'll be explained more as I kind of tell the story um, of why I just felt like that longing and that intensity, for this city. So, um, and before we get started, Like I said, I already have this channel, typed out. So I'm just going to be reading off the page a lot of the time, which I don't really like to do that on videos or lives. But just the nature of this, it's already channeled. I'm going to be reading aloud. And then I'm also going to kind of be asking questions, maybe getting more information, getting clarifications. I will be live channeling that. I already have the Akashic records open, so I can channel directly from the Akashic records if we as we go through. And I want to say, if you really enjoyed this type of channeled information, learning more about galactic history, about ETs, what's happened in other galactic civilizations, please subscribe. I do, live channelings almost every week as of now. So lots of information. I'm thinking about channeling maybe some certain Nintendo Mario characters next. Kind of learning about, are there real beings who are like them out there, similar to them? Because obviously they're not real, they're characters. But yeah, so I have a lot of cool stuff coming up. So please hit the subscribe button. And then also down in the show notes below, I have a free meditation you guys can check out too. If you're wondering if you could also begin to channel information, or just, it's not even always channeling information. Maybe it's like getting more in touch with your psychic abilities. Then you're going to want to open and activate your third eye. So I have a free meditation below that you can click on. You can access now. And the thing about it that's so great is that it's only 8 minutes long. So you can do it in the morning, you can do it in the night, you can do it on your lunch break. But it's just a super easy and quick meditation. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start getting into the message about Polaris. So all right, so this is where we start. These the beings that I was channeling from the Akashic records, but I was talking with particular guides as well. Now they're going to reveal more about themselves later on at the end of the message, but it's going to be talking from like their perspective, like they're a person, right? And when I'm channeling this, it's like they're coming through, but I wasn't in full trance where it's like my consciousness has left my body and then there's just another consciousness coming in and typing. So I was kind of taking what they're saying and like putting it into words. It was more of like an inner knowing was coming through. And I mean, clairvoyance is always coming through for me because I always get mental images. So it's really written from their perspective, but also like there's some of my voice in there too because I wasn't fully like in trance. All right.